The trap of labeling oneself. It is kind of a trap that we can commonly get ourselves into in everyday life. There are good things to actually labeling, and there's also bad things to actually labeling. We need points of reference, if anything, to make sense of ourselves and of the world around us. A simple example of that is when you look at the northern hemisphere of the Earth and the southern hemisphere. These are merely points of reference. These are names. These are names that we attribute to the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. When there is no up or down in space, there is no actual physical up or physical down. We actually need some naming of which is north and which is south. A compass will point to a direction, but is that direction when you look out from the Earth the actual physical north? Or is it the north in relation to the Earth? And even that north will tilt a bit, it'll oscillate. So it's never a true north or a true south. So really, I mean, if you wanted to have fun with things, if there is no up and down in space, then the northern hemisphere could be the southwest hemisphere. The southern hemisphere could be the east hemisphere. So it's merely a point of reference, a label that we give to the northern and the hemisphere. You could pretty much flip the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere around, and apart from having to rewrite a whole heap of books, it wouldn't really affect the Earth that greatly. It's not going to worry too much what label is associated to its north or south. But points of reference are actually needed in the sense of making sense of things. For a relation for everyone to make sense of something, it's almost like a common census is actually made in relation to how we identify with the world. So if we're all in agreement that the northern hemisphere is the northern hemisphere, even though there's no up and down, I guess it stops confusion. Even our language itself is in a similar sense, a naming of words, but when you really break it down, we've just sort of all agreed on common sounds that we actually make that somehow make sense to us, sort of thing. We've become very educated and very involved in it. But really, what's the difference between me making this noise and me blah, 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 sort of thing? Is really, but for someone, they might fully understand the gibberish that I just made up, sort of thing. So, but what I'm saying is it's the same tone, just in an order that we actually make sense of. It's the words itself is a naming that we can actually give things. I mean, we even name the words that we give, nouns, verbs, adjectives, these sorts of things, so we can make sense of the world that we live in. And everything that we give a name to, sometimes we attach a meaning to. And sometimes, as even with language evolves, meanings get lost. They get changed or warped, or new words get made up, and we attach those meanings to it, sort of thing. And I guess in the sense we're relating it to humans, where we give ourselves names, we give ourselves titles, we give ourselves our own sense of meanings that we get quite attached to. And I think when we look into some of these meanings and where they get lost, bad things and good things can actually happen. Because I think when you look at, or if you try not to get lost in or too attached to a meaning that isn't actually accurate to your own self, it's just kind of almost like a blanket term, then you get lost in that attachment or that attachment to that meaning. Another way is where you're referred to as certain aspects. You could be told you're a certain type of person, sort of thing. You're a certain type of this. It's almost as if like the other person is saying, I know you based on this, sort of thing. I know your whole identity based on this. And there is a danger in that, because one of the things with life is that you're constantly changing, constantly growing. Who you are today is probably not going to be who you are tomorrow, whether it be better for or for worse, sort of thing. So if you truly know yourself, then I would say it's going to be probably a boring existence from here on in, sort of thing, because part of life is discovery of new things, discovering new things about yourself, sort of thing. So no one actually truly knows anyone, and no one probably truly knows themselves, sort of thing. It's like, I know for myself that things that I held dearly to no longer really matter to me much anymore, or I've learned different ways, sort of thing. Every day is a learning experience, as they would say. So it's actually hard to hold firm to a label, and a label can actually be something that is quite firm and stuck onto people, or at least is perceived that way. I myself have been given by the medical world many different labels, and by the same medical world relabeled, basically. But what I'm saying by that is the label itself, you can become your label. You can become every aspect of that label as defined, as prescribed, almost. So for myself, a little bit of information is I was originally diagnosed with schizophrenia and other things like depression, epilepsy, all these things. And what I meant by the same medical world that diagnosed me was the same medical world that waved away these diagnoses, sort of thing. But in that time, and even in my time as a mental health support worker, what I did see was people became their labels, myself included. You become the way you are diagnosed, and it almost becomes a mantra of how you're expected to perform. For example, I was a person that was always told I had no confidence. And if you get told that enough, especially by the people that care for you and even provide care for you, then it becomes a mindset, it becomes a belief system, it becomes a label. I can tell you now, I've probably got a bit too much confidence, but at the same time, if I had stuck by that label, if I had become attached to those labels, then it would be something that would define me for the rest of the time. And sometimes these definitions can define you into the grave, basically. You get so stuck in that way of thinking that you can't see anything else. You become fixated in your view in life. So I think it's something that is something that probably where you have less attachment to your labels. A good little bit of information that might actually help with, like, say, with, like, you might be going, well, this depression, this anxiety, whatever sort of thing. It's like, this is actually me, sort of thing. These are what I've been given. This is my diagnosis. And it's not me saying that it's untrue, but how I was saying with like how labels are given, and that you're always changing, and what the label is not what you'll be in the future. But even it was I think Dr. Robert Spitzer, one of the creators of the DSM, for example, which has a lot of different labels in there, even said himself that it's just basically a categorization of basic human emotion, sort of thing. So he himself has said that, sort of thing. So it's a categorization of basic human emotion, what you're feeling. So back to what I was saying about how that malodorous is actually just another word for smelly, sort of thing. These terms can actually be just names, a set of programming knowledge, language for just basic human emotions. So that's where it's like getting yourself in a robot type mindset is actually limiting. It gives you those labels. Sometimes we attach the meaning a bit too much to something that is organic. We're not technically robots, we're not technically machines, and we change every day, sort of thing. And sometimes, this is what I always find funny, is that sometimes by referring to ourselves so almost firmly in that attachment of us being computer-like sort of thing, it's really just the brain thinking of itself in third person. The brain has created something to actually relate to itself. Humans have been an evolutionary thing. We've constantly learnt, developed, and all that. So rather than labeling yourself into a cage, just freeing yourself, it's like our terminology for something will completely change probably later in life, sort of thing. It's like, I do remember talking about where we used to refer to ourselves as records. It's like we get stuck in a groove in something, sort of thing. This is before computers. Then computers come along, we start to reference ourselves as computers, sort of thing. It's like there'll probably be something else down the track that we start referencing ourselves. But knowing of yourself, and that as you change, as you develop, and that you constantly learn and grow, even past your set age, you can actually free yourself and become a lot more open-minded, I guess. I was going to say narrow-minded, but become more open-minded, not less narrow in your view, and you become more open. So that's what I've got to say about labeling. Just knowing that, and I'm not saying that that the label that you've been given might not attribute to how you're presenting, but I'm just saying maybe looking at the actual circumstances that actually got you there. And EFT is one of those things that actually peel back those layers. It actually helps reduce some of those stressful stuff that when you do start looking inward, that it actually helps alleviate that. Because sometimes when we just talk about our emotions, we can get quite stressed, or even in our breath rate can become quite stressed, and just reliving for a cognitive sense. This actually helps reduce in the subconscious. So that's all I have to say about that. I'm down from Uflotion, one of the EFT tapping and Soma breath instructors. So if you're interested in booking in a session, maybe freeing yourself from some labels, or just freeing yourself from physical or emotional discomfort, definitely book in. And I think I'll end this session by clicking start. Start is my end. I'm labeling start end now. Okay, all right, it's been cheeky. See you later.